May Day morning. Not working today. It's a beautiful thing. It's going to have a beautiful march today. Everything's going to go right for. Workers' rights, to oppose the war, bring home the troops, stand up for what you believe in. That's what we got going on, and I can't say it no better than that.
Today. It is only by banding together, it is only by struggling that we're going to change things, brothers and sisters. And it's vital that all of us see the links between the civil rights movement, between the labor movement, between the immigrant rights movement, and the anti-war movement. Because all of these popular struggles share one thing in common, and that is we confront a common enemy, a government that is by the corporation and for the corporation. And until the popular movements of this country unite and overthrow that government, we will not see any change in this country. Brothers and sisters, I leave you with one change. Nobody has ever won freedom in this country. Nobody has ever won their rights in this country. Nobody has ever changed anything in this country without struggle. We have never advanced our rights by politely asking for it. We have advanced our rights by hitting the streets and fighting for it.
Union time! Union time! Union time! Union time!
Shut down its entire West Coast as a message to Mr. Bush that we are tired of this war and that it has to come to an end. May Day is a very important labor day for the United States. It's actually the first Labor Day in the United States. The Labor Day that we celebrate in September is not the real Labor Day here. We all know about the struggle in the 1800s for the 8-hour day, which was a very important struggle. It was a struggle for safety, it was a struggle for survival, and it was a struggle for working conditions here in the United States. Here in the United States, workers have been struggling a long time, and it seems like now, brothers and sisters, we're struggling harder than ever. That's why these kind of gatherings, these kind of demonstrations and actions are totally necessary, so that we can sway our government into doing what the people want the government to do instead of what the government wants to do for themselves and for the 1% upper richer class. This action started last October, I believe it was, an anti-war conference. It was sponsored by the Bay Area Longshore and Clerk and Walk-and-Boss locals. A conference that was attended by delegates from all over the world to talk about finding ways to end this war. And one of the things we talked about, and one of the things, the demonstration here today, this war is not going to end. It's not going to end because of the politicians we put in office last November, or 2 Novembers ago, who have failed miserably. It's not going to end until we get people in the streets, exactly like happened at the end of the Vietnam War, to end this thing.
I asked the New York Times reporter last week, will you be covering this event? And he said, is it newsworthy? What do you say? Is it newsworthy? I can't hear you. Is it newsworthy?
Stop the war now! Stop the war now! Stop the war now!
The union was under orders of an arbitrator not to stop work, but as dozens of anti-war protesters picketed in the port of Oakland this morning, not a longshoreman was in sight as the day shift started. From Seattle to Long Beach, 29 ports were closed and 30 ships were idled by the work stoppage. The Pacific Maritime Association, which represents the shippers, says the union broke the contract.
It's an illegal strike, and it's frustrating.
The PMA estimates that the 6,000 strikers affected 11 million other West Coast jobs.
There were 10,000 movements of cargo, 10,000 containers that should have been loaded onto ships or unloaded from ships onto the pier. None of that happened. There's a significant economic impact from that.
It's about being as united with the workers around the world, to be as connected as we can be with the workers around the world, with labor organizations and working families.
And was there disagreement and debate in the ILWU about taking this action?
There was up until recently, and recently I was in the last organizational caucus. They made a decision, and I was very proud of this. The resolution was entered by Local 10. They've always been on board with May 1st and May Day, but it finally got the approval it needed to have this stop work, and I couldn't be prouder. I think it's long overdue. It should have happened some time ago, and it's finally happening. Now,
they called out the jobs here this morning, and apparently nobody took the jobs.
I'm glad that, because the ILWU is you know, if they're shown both sides of a situation and they hear speakers at their meetings and they know what's going on, they'll make the right decision. They just have to get involved. They have to get involved more and more, and just like any other demonstration, if it's important enough, don't take a job.
If we do not continue to fight for this, then it will be taken away, and then we'll be working 10 hours and 12 hours and then working for slave wages and no medical benefits for ourselves and our children and for other companies around the world. We set a standard for some of the other countries in China and Mexico, the conditions that are there. Hopefully that they can start to have the same conditions and benefits that we have.
More than 1,000 marched through San Francisco this morning, along with other supporters. Union bosses say that they're trying to let elected leaders and the business community know their opposition to the war. Many of the longshoremen are military veterans.
But there was a consensus among our rank and file members that it was time to take some action. Many of our members were disappointed with the last midterm elections and the Democrats, gaining an advantage, and there not being any action to stop the war.
This morning, several dozen members of the group Direct Action to Stop the War supported those longshoremen by picketing outside the Port of Oakland. The union says operations will return to normal tomorrow.
In Seattle, longshoremen demonstrated at the port and joined students for a march and rally. The Pacific Maritime Association says 6,000 longshoremen should have been at work today at ports up and down the West Coast. Instead, they were on strike to protest the Iraq War. 30 cargo ships sat idle. One of those was at Oakland. The port says normally 3 to 5 ships come in, but today there was only one scheduled.
I think there was quite a bit of advance notice in terms of the possibility that this could happen. So our customers were aware that the planned activities today could disrupt their business.
It's one of the ways that working people can really make a difference, is that with being able to withhold our labor.
Elliott thinks the strike is not really about the Iraq War, but about current contract negotiations.
And clearly some conversations are going to happen with the union to try to figure out how to move past this.
Truckers who are not union members were unaware of the strike. They say they'll now be behind schedule by a day. And this morning there was a brief demonstration by an anti-war group who tried to block rail workers from going to their job. There were no containers on the trains.
Now you're facing a contract fight. What if the employers try to take you on over this issue and make you pay for this economic crisis that's happening in this country?
I hope I'm speaking for my brothers and sisters within the ILWU. I'm ready for a fight. I just came back from Australia. They have been in fights before, and I'm ready for a good fight. I'm not going to just go whimpering off to the sidelines somewhere, but just like the last contract where we kind of had to hold the line and sit on the fence, this time around we really need to step up and show our unity and our solidarity.
Swing them on now.
table. Today's action is as historically significant as the decision of 4 young university students who sat in for justice. The strong, proud men and women of the ILWU have drawn a line in the sand, and I am proud of you. By your actions here today, your line in the sand is a demand for public policy that reflects your values. Your line in the sand, a livable wage, repeal of the Bush tax cuts, repeal of the Patriot Acts, the Secret Evidence Act, the Military Commissions Act, the right to unionize, single payer, health care, repeal of NAFTA, and end to the Bush-Pelosi war. Military recruiters out and more teachers in our classrooms. Nancy Pelosi wants to sneak another war funding bill to the president. She thinks you don't know. She thinks we won't care. She thinks she can bushwhack and bamboozle us from the speaker's chair. But Nancy, we're watching you. In fact, the whole world is watching. We see you when you choose to spend $720 million a day for war, and yet teachers are being laid off in your own district. Speaker Pelosi, we see you when you remain silent on torture that violates the law, irreparably harms, and sometimes even kills the innocent, and robs us all of our dignity as Americans.
100 years ago, on July the 12th, the Great White Fleet was leaving San Francisco. And the Great White Fleet, where was it going? It was going to the Philippines to bring democracy to the people of the Philippines. Now, when we look at what happened in the Philippines, 3 million people were killed in the Philippines. Bring democracy. May Day was built in 1886 and started in 1886 for the 8-hour day. It's celebrated all over the world by workers. Workers are marching in Turkey, in China, in India, all over, and they're beginning to march in this country.
I am from Kurdistan. 30 companies from Kurdistan is sold to Turkey. The only cement factory we had in Suleymaniye is sold. And the workers, they went on strike and they put them in prison. And they shot one of the lawyers. That's what's happening in Iraq. Everything is getting destroyed. What's happening in this country, since I've been here 31 years, it's going down, and the working class becoming jobless. I myself, speaking out against the war, have lost my job as a doctor.
From the OEA, and I want to express our solidarity with its courageous decision to shut down 29 ports along the West Coast. This is an incredible day. Give yourselves a round of applause for doing this. We demand a reordering of our national priorities so that the needs of children, the poor, immigrants, the elderly come first, while the corporate greed and war profiteering are relegated to the dustbin of history. We again salute the ILWU for having courage to hit the war machine where it feel it. And we stand with you in demanding an interwar and full funding for education and social services.
We have to hurt them in the pocketbook because they'll never be hurt like my family. They'll never be hurt like the Iraqi families. They'll never be hurt like our brothers and sisters who have to risk everything to come across the border, because what they do is to line their pocketbooks and their bank accounts with our children's flesh and blood. And we have to do everything we can to put ourselves in the way of that war machine.
May Day 2008, what does it mean to you?
Well, I hope that it means that the labor struggle is getting invigorated, and we're the labor itself, the workers, the rank and file, are going to stand up for their rights and take back what we need.
And what are some of the problems that the unions face? What obstacles do the labor movement face in this country?
Passive leadership. The fact that the international unions are siding with the companies now. I can give you a real good example of that. The UAW said that the auto workers had to take concessions of 50% of their pay for new hires in order to help the manufacturing company, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, to be profitable. They haven't even put any of that stuff in place yet, and Ford made $100 million profit the first quarter of 2008. You know, I mean, how can you justify that to the rank and file workers, that it was necessary to take concessions of that much money for a company that now has turned around immediately and are showing profits?
So what kind of mentality is that?
Well, that's corporate unionism. That's what it is. It's the fact that the UAW now holds stock in the company. So with that $100 million, the UAW just made 12 cents a share on the stock that they hold. My international union made 12 cents a share on the stock that they now hold in Ford.
How does that benefit the worker?
Oh, it doesn't benefit the worker at all. It benefits the bosses. It gives the bosses the passive union that they need in order to control the workforce and get the work out of them that they want.
Now, you've been fired over a year. You were fired in April of last year. What's happened in your experience in 1 year of firing?
Well, I mean, I've seen, going out and about, being a road warrior, I've seen a lot of struggle out there. And it's made me aware of the fact that we're not alone. That what happened to our local and to the officers of our local is something that's happening all over the world in unions and with the workers.
In your union, you have debates. What does it mean to be a democratic union?
That is from the bottom up. Our officials do not make judgment calls. They have to bring it to the union. They have to bring it to the floor, and our members make those calls.
So what kind of debates? Do you have debates in your union meeting do you have differences?
Oh, big differences, differences every day. And I tell people every day, if you're not here to hear those differences, to vote on those differences, don't complain tomorrow when those questions come up of why are we doing this or why are we doing that.
So this action today really was discussed and debated in the membership?
This action was discussed and debated, and I think everybody stood up for this one. Everybody stood up and wanted it to happen, even though that it was some differences on why or when or what we gonna do the day of, but everybody wanted it, of course. We got a lot of younger brothers and sisters coming in, so it's a little harder to push it over on them. And that's where we starting at. And we just hope that our examples of health and safety, our examples of following the contract, our examples of standing up together, our examples push over on everybody else outside of Local 10. Believe it, understand it. My father's a bus driver. I tell him every day, you can't get nothing done if you don't go to your union meetings. My mother's a teacher's aide. I tell her the exact same thing. You can't get nothing over unless you go to your union meetings. You can't believe that you can't sit there and just complain about what's wrong with your job without showing up and being a voice. Be heard. Stand up.
Stop the war now! Stop the war now! Stop the war now! Stop the war now! Stop the war now!
Local 10 knows how to stand together. Injury to one is an injury to all, and if we can't stand up, who will? We gotta show everybody that it's okay to stand up for what you believe in, workers' rights.